about all of the veterans that were or all of the people that were left at the state mental home, which was the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest home, and they had over 3,500 people that were from 1891 to 1971 that were on the shelf. And if you look at our website, you'll see cans and canisters. Those are pictures from that Pulitzer Prize-winning story that showed that not just veterans, but people were being left and abandoned and unclaimed by families now. And so that made me say that this was not a local problem. This was a national problem, and that it was something that here we are in the United States of America, which we rate and say and put as the top country in the world.
Right.
And yet we had something like a skeleton in our closet that nothing was ever done after a veteran came back and survived the war. And I kind of place veterans in four categories. The first category is a veteran that went to war and was missing in action or KIA.
Okay.
And we do everything in the world to try to help them, solve them, get them back, get them buried. They're still doing it now for people they find out of JPAC in Hawaii. And so we're still finding those guys. The next guy is well, I started that wrong. That first is the KIAs, the guys that were killed in action. Then you have the MIAs and the POWs, and those are missing, and we're still looking for those. So there's a process inside. The third category is those that came back and were very successful in life. And then you have the last category of veterans, that somebody that was severely hurt by the war, mentally or physically, and they ended up being disenfranchised, had PTSD, had other stuff going on, and so they're forgotten. And they're forgotten for a number of reasons. And one of them is that at this day and age, some people don't want to pay. Some people say the guy was, excuse the French, was an asshole, and we don't want nothing to do with him.
Mm-hmm. And so, okay.
What happened was somebody was trying to beep in on the phone, so it
no problem.
me. but anyway, that's the categories of stuff. And so the problem is those that survived and came back but couldn't resettle or have problems, or you hear all the stories about the VA. These guys would end up passing and nobody wanted anything to do with them. In some cases, it's something like a remote niece or remote somebody and they didn't want to pay. Or in some cases, he was a jerk. Or in some cases, they didn't even know. They were found a homeless and indigent under a bridge or something, and the police had an ID, but that's the extent of it. And so nobody was taking care of those people. You go to even the lowest third world country, and in some cases, if somebody passes, everybody is buried within 3 days, to one extreme, to something in between that. But not in America.
That's just
there is
insane.
No laws that say go to the funeral home and find anything out, or even research that they are a veteran.
Okay, so here's the thing. My next question is this. So you were touched, you started a movement, you incorporated so it could go national. How does the process work for our listeners? Can you explain the logistics of the operation?
Well, the logistics turned out to be that, one, because there was no laws, when I incorporated as a 501c3, we didn't make this to be like any other veterans organization. The first thing we did was incorporate solely with the sole mission of finding, identifying, and interring all veterans and their dependents. Now, the last part is very important. If you're the wife of the veteran, you're eligible under Title 38 to be buried as well. And if you're a dependent child, let's say you had a child with autism or with something that needed care, the VA would continue to pay you for that child as a dependent, and they're also authorized burial at a VA cemetery.
Oh, that's really
missing
good to
in
know.
America,
Yeah.
Missing in America doesn't just do the veteran. We look for their dependents and family, and if they're eligible, we do them as well. And so what we had to do was, with no laws in each state had to have a coordinator that then learned the laws of each state and went into each state based on what they have, and we have to call on funeral homes, call on crematoriums and morgues, in some cases cemeteries, and we ask them to provide us a list of names and Social Security numbers that's required by the VA to identify them. So we physically have to go do some of this. It's now evolved a little bit in where they can provide us a list. And then we made an agreement with the Department of Veterans Affairs for their National Verification Office and Scheduling Office in Jefferson Barracks, Missouri, to let us input with a direct input, just like we were a county morgue or something. So they have a special form for us and a special identification process that we turn in our names, and they then give us a response as fast as they can. And then we also have some special cases that if it is a law enforcement requirement that somebody's passed under the bridge and we need urgent, we can go back and get a 72-hour approval. So, but remember, some of our veterans take us up to 18 months or longer to identify.
Wow. What's the
oldest?
oldest?
And I think part of that is, and I think I talked to you earlier about it, is that in our nation's history, there's 50 million veterans that have served our country, roughly. Not exactly that, but roughly that.
Right.
Of those 50 million people, 26 million are on computers. The rest are on microfiche in the bottom of the floors in Jefferson Barracks at the National Personnel Records Center. And some of these, even with the Air Force and the other ones that were burned up in the fire of 73, some are not found at all. So the thing is, when we go in to request somebody, if it's somebody that's been computerized, no problem. If they've been drawing benefits or doing something, they find them pretty quick. But if they have to go down and spend 3-4 days a week in the microfiche looking down in the bottom of the basements, it takes longer.
I can imagine that would definitely increase the time, especially with such a huge database of people. And I'm curious, too, you're locating people all over the country, but what is the oldest soldier that you've recovered and laid to rest?
Well, there's actually a few that I would like to categorize together.
Okay.
And those few are that in our search across the nation, we have found 15 Civil War soldiers, okay, from the 1860s, 70s.
Sure.
And 5 of their wives.
Wow.
And those people were on the shelves for 93 years.
It's incredible.
They stayed on a shelf for 93 years. And they still wouldn't have been taken care of if our project hadn't found them. And so that's some of the very heartwarming stories. I can't even begin. I will hide this a bit, but at one point we found a lady that was a very, very important lady and related to very powerful government figures, and we found her, and she was worth $12 million. And the family took the money and abandoned her.
Oh,
and
my.
She's sitting there for 40, 50 years on a shelf, and we come to find out that this is a very important lady. Needless to say, we turned it in to Jefferson Barracks, who turned it in to the FBI, and 2 days later they came up in black cars and said, "This didn't happen. You don't know anything about this."
Wow.
So,
Black
so
Ops.
the point that I'm trying to make is that this isn't mutually exclusive to poor people or people that can't pay. It comes down to family and commitment. It comes down to if a wife lost a husband and then she goes to an assisted living facility, or the husband, and they say, we're keep him here, we're going to come back and get him. It's something as simple as not going back. We had one lady that we found in Michigan, and we went to her and we said, ma'am, what's the story with your husband? And she says, well, what do you mean? He died and we buried him 63 years ago. And we said, well, no, ma'am. Here's his urn. We have him in our hands.
Mm.
And you see, the point was the family thought because they left it at the funeral home, but they didn't give disposition instructions on what to do with him, he never got buried.
And she's this whole time thinking it had been taken care of for this many years.
She thinks it's taken care of. You know, we haven't had another case where the guy died and he requested to be dumped in his local river. Well, we go in and investigate and find it. Lo and behold, I'm holding him in my hands and talking to the family on the phone, and they're saying, no, he's buried out in the river, and for the last 10 years, we've been going having a picnic every year where he's buried at.
Oh, my goodness. And yet he
wasn't
wasn't there. And this is all due to your investigative work and your team. And we're in the interest of time. I'm gonna kind of speed us along here because I definitely want to get this out there. I want you to tell us about this amazing thing that you had happen by getting the Veterans Burial with Dignity Act passed. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And then my next question after that is about your escorts and the volunteers so that people can understand what they do and how they can get involved in helping. So can you first tell us about the act that you got passed and signed by Obama?
Yeah, actually it took 3 years to get to him to sign, and it was called the Missing in America Act of 2009, then it went 10, then it went 11. But in 2012, Patty Murray from Washington incorporated in what they call the Veterans Dignified Burial Act, Senate Bill 3322, and at the 11th hour of the 11th day on December 31st at 6:30 at night, the last act passed was our law. And
that's amazing.
And there was a lot of laws in it that were kind of small military bills that they just didn't have time to get to. But the gist of our law simply means that there was lots of government regulations that said if somebody passed over 2 years ago, they weren't eligible. So all these guys from the Civil War, all the stuff we got, weren't eligible for any kind of a benefit because they had died past the 2-year limit. What this did was that said that anybody that's found unclaimed on the shelves, no matter when, is authorized to have an urn or a casket and fall under Title 38 for a free burial at a VA cemetery. And it passed, and Obama signed it on January the 10th of 2013, and it went into effect January 10th of 2014. And so now it's a law of the land. And we have 33 other states that have also passed laws allowing us to go in and take people and be released from the HIPAA laws and stuff to obtain medical records and information about them.
That's amazing, guys. So one person with an idea, with a drive and a longing in his heart to see veterans treated properly, changed a law and helped a law to be enacted in our country that will stand for time, we hope, where these veterans will finally be able to get what they deserve, which is the proper burial. And by freeing up a little bit of the bureaucracies that surrounded it, Fred has enabled that process to run a little bit more smoothly. So I want to quickly get to the fact that your volunteers and escorts are 100% just working mostly from their own